Get 5 coffins ready.
Hey everyone, and welcome to my guide for Hel. Hel is a stance switching mage who has exceptional damage and healing, at the cost of being exceptionally easy to kill. She's viable in both mid lane and support role, and both roles play almost exactly the same. Build wise though, they're very different. Support Hel focuses on buying tank items specifically made with healers like her in mind, and with a dash of damage items on top. Then mid lane Hel is the opposite, all out damage with maybe a tank item or two, and likes to focus on buying cooldown reduction in both roles. Relics wise, you absolutely need beads and Aegis on Hel in the mid lane. There is very little wiggle room, other than buying Shell to upgrade it to Phantom Shell to avoid things like Odin or Cabrakan ultimates, which create walls that Hel is unable to pass through unless she has Phantom Shell. Support wise though, the world is Hel's oyster. She can literally go any relic you want for the specific situation. Meditation, Curse Donk, Frenzy, Sunder, whatever you want, Hel can build it as a support. Shard wise, as I'm sure you can guess, it's just Horn Shard. Let's take a look at Hel's passive and stance switch ability real quick. Hel gains a bonus depending on which stance she's in, but she requires 3 seconds to fully charge this bonus. In Dark Stance, she gains a whopping 20% bonus damage on all her abilities and basic attacks, and in Light Stance, she reduces her enemy's power for up to 12%. Again, both of these bonuses come 3 seconds after she's been in their respective stance. So that means, for optimal wave clear and teamfight damage, you want to change it to Dark Stance or remain in Dark Stance to ensure you have full passive benefit. As well as on the other end of that, when trying to escape, you want to make sure you stay in Light Stance to reduce the power of all enemies chasing you down. Very basic strategies here, but it's something you have to keep in mind, especially once the game gets later and Hel really starts to come online. Since it's percentage based, 20% damage increase and 12% damage decrease from enemies hugely adds up, so make the most out of it. That said, even though you want to make the most of this passive, Hel is a very spammy character, thanks to her stance switch. As I mentioned, Hel swaps between light and dark stance, and can of course do this without leveling her 4th ability. When leveled though, she'll be granted a secondary passive, and this one is granted in full as soon as you enter the stance. In Light Stance, Hel has increased protection scaling with the ability, and in Dark Stance, she is granted bonus magical power, again scaling with the level of the ability. Then, at all times, Hel is granted bonus MP5, scaling with the level of this ability, and gains half of whatever the current bonus is for the opposite stance that she's currently in. Basically, just pay attention to your main passive's benefits and those bonuses, and these secondary passive bonuses serve as the same sort of purpose. Light Stance to heal and survive, Dark Stance for damage. Speaking of which, let's get to those damaging abilities, starting with Hel's Dark Stance first ability. Hel throws a projectile which passes through walls and minions, but stops on gods and explodes in a rather large AoE when it reaches either its maximum range or hits a god. This ability, it does damage. Yeah, it's awesome, it goes forward and does damage. Yeah. Basically, all you need to know about this ability is that the AoE at the end is rather large, and you're going to want to learn not only the range of the ability, but also the range of the AoE so that you always get the damage out from the ability as poke, because this is not only Hel's best wave clear ability, but it's also super reliable as poke throughout the game, and especially once the Dark Stance damage bonus is applied. Jokes aside, this ability does so much damage. Hel's first ability in Light Stance sees her throw a projectile with the same speed and range. However, this projectile will only deal damage to enemy gods it hits, and will not explode into AoE upon reaching maximum range or an enemy god, and deals no damage to minions, but this ability is still able to be used over walls. However, upon hitting an allied god with this ability, Hel will heal herself and the allied god for a significant amount of health and mana both. So basically, this ability is like if the Dark Stance one actually took skill to use, because this ability is thin, and it's hard to hit both allies and enemies alike with it. So you want to practice the Dark Stance one, but you need to master the Light Stance one. This may sound like I'm just dancing around explaining these abilities further, but really, you just want to use this ability from both stances whenever you can. Yourself or an ally are low, Light Stance 1. An enemy is disrespecting your range, Dark Stance 1. Hel, being a stance switcher, is an ability spammer, it just comes with the territory. So while you will drain your mana quickly using both versions of this ability whenever you can, and need to have the skill to hit both of them consistently, and use them in difficult situations like quickly switching from Light Stance to heal teammates, then quickly switch back to Dark Stance to use your first ability again, it can be pretty mechanically demanding. Not to mention using them in less obvious situations like healing allies or dealing damage to enemies over walls with either stance of the ability. Mastery of these projectiles and knowing all the situations to use them in is what separates a good Hel player from a great one. And that's mostly because the rest of her kit is very simple, so let's get to it. In Dark Stance, Hel's second ability is a large circle AoE that, after a short delay, will slow and reduce the magical protections of all enemies inside the AoE. So remember the whole part where I was like, oh, you need to learn your first ability really well and master it? Well, this ability takes out a lot of the difficulty. And while it's almost always best to use your first ability raw in order to keep yourself as unpredictable as possible, when looking to all-in targets you absolutely want to use this ability first to get things started. Then, of course, one right afterwards. Use this ability like you would any CC ability, except you can't really miss it. Use it to start combos, use it to slow enemies down while chasing them, and you can even use it at your feet while trying to escape to slow enemies down from chasing you. Mind you, when it comes to escaping, Hell's Light Stance 2 is much more important. Hell produces the same size AoE, but this AoE, again after a short delay, will cleanse all CC affecting allies including yourself, and will leave all allies affected CC immune for a brief moment. Basically, if you understand how purification beads work, this ability works in the exact same way, except the duration of CC immunity is far more brief. And of course, if you're already affected by hard CC, you won't be able to cast this ability on yourself or any of your allies. So you need to time the ability well so that you ensure you hit yourself and your allies, but also not cleanse any CC too late. This ability alone is capable of completely cleansing huge blowout ultimates like Ares ultimate, Zhang Chen ultimate, and so on. But of course, that requires teamwork from your team to group up so you can cleanse them. So cleanse your teammates wherever applicable, but unless you're in comms with your teammate, you should really just prioritize cleansing yourself to make sure you get out of most bad situations. It'll take some time to learn how to cleanse every last ability in the game, but barring some very quick CC abilities or abilities that are literally instant like Nox or Ganesh sounds, you can actually time the ability to immune every single hard CC ability in the game. And even in those cases of instant hard CC, if you have a good read on what your enemies are trying to do, you can always cleanse yourself preemptively to avoid it. Of course, that's not always going to work, and Hell really doesn't have much to save herself outside of this cleanse. All she has really is her third ability in her Light Stance. In Hell's third ability in Light Stance, Hell heals all allies within a large AoE around herself, and boosts the movement speed of all allies as well, and this movement speed increases as well as the heal are also applied to herself. But unlike your first ability in Light Stance, you aren't required to affect your teammates in any way for the ability to heal and the movement speed to affect you, so as with the cleanse before, you want to use this on as many teammates as possible. But given that this is Smite and people sometimes forget to turn their monitor on, always look out for number 1, which is you, by the way, in case you didn't already know that. Again, it's hard to give you context on when to use this ability since, again, you want to go full machine gun spam on Hell and use this as often as possible to keep yourself healed up and mobile. Just watch out for situations where you know you're going to need to cleanse multiple CCs with your 2 and or purification beads, and try to time out the casting of this ability with your cleanse so that you can be sure it goes off and you're able to get that movement speed benefit. Because if you use it too early and get CC'd, you're going to lose out on some of the movement speed time. Then, use it too late and you might have this ability interrupted as it's coming out. Hell's third ability in Dark Stance has a similar issue with getting interrupted, but other than that, it's crazy simple. Hell winds up and deals damage in a wide circle AoE around herself. This AoE cannot be body blocked and can be used over walls, although it's only ever able to get over walls like player-made walls like maybe Ymir or Thor wall. The map walls are too wide for the AoE to reach. And you're all caught up. That is Hell's 3. Okay, I know this is like the 4th time I've kind of laughed off abilities because they're so brutally simple, but that's because they really are. Hell herself is not simple, and while she has combos, you have to be very careful about when you want to use them and know when to stop them and just back off or use another ability entirely. For instance, Dark Stance 2, 1, 3, and Walk Up while you 3. So simple even your hamster could do it. You have a hamster, right? Okay, but the 3 takes a while to come out, right? Boom, you're against Neath and she roots you as you walk up to 3. So instead of 3ing, you want to switch to Light Stance and Cleanse, 3, and get out of there. What about going Dark Stance 1, 2, Light Stance 1, and now you have the option to either press on with Dark Stance 3 or stay in Light Stance with your 2 and 3 to get yourself out of dodge if need be. See, things heated up a little bit. That's what playing Hell is, having this airtight plan where you deal a million billion damage and you win the game and people finally like you, but it just doesn't always end up that way. Regardless, here's some combos with Hell. Dark Stance 2, 1, Light Stance 3. Dark Stance 1, 2, Light Stance 1, 3, Dark Stance 3. Light Stance 3, 2, 1, Dark Stance 1, 2, 3. For ability leveling, you want your 1 at level 1, your 3 at level 2, then skip leveling your 2 for a certain amount of time. From there you level your 1, your 3, your stance switch, then your 2. Leveling the 2 is really up in the air, but I've never been opposed to doing it once your 1 is maxed. You can hold off a little while longer to get your damage online just a bit sooner. Or you can do it even earlier and make your combos easier and make yourself safer. This option is definitely better when you're newer to the character, but it's all up to personal preference. I mean, the damage difference really isn't that much. Hell is not easy. I just spent, the last 7 minutes or so barely explaining her abilities because they bear so little explaining. But plop yourself into a match with no experience on Hell and you're gonna get trampled. Hell takes a lot of finesse to get right in every single stage of the match. Early game, you need to take your chances and walk up to 1-3 waves to clear them, but also have the wherewithal to know when to completely give up waves simply because you just don't know where the enemy jungler is, because they can kill you, like, really easily. Disrespecting your mid lane opponents can yield the same results. Even gods with easy to cleanse abilities like Poseidon or Anubis can still slap down Hell if she's too overzealous. This is why I think it's best to start off with Hell in the support role. Hell in the support role is tanky, annoying, a high damage healer who can cleanse all CC if she times it well, and keeps all of her teammates alive all the time. Mind you, she lacks the spice of mid lane Hell, and when people are starting out in a MOBA, they want to try out gods like Hell. I've talked about what can happen when you as the Hell player disrespect enemies, but when a good Hell player gets disrespected, she can just as easily completely destroy the enemy lane. Keep them poked out and underneath their tower, all while keeping themselves far more sustained than any other mid laner. She's a complete menace in the hands of a good player. Instead of showing you my excellent and informative gameplay, I'm going to give you some gameplay from literal robots like Paul down in the description of this video. That gameplay is obviously going to be hard to follow if you're a new player, but that's sort of what I'm getting at with Hell. You can play Hell support and ask your teammates to stand still for your light stance 1, only ever cleanse the obvious stuff and sit under tower for the first 10 minutes, and probably get by just fine. But the Hell players who take it to the next level and position perfectly, hit absolutely every ability, and maximize their cleanse and movement speed are the Hell players that absolutely everybody fears and nobody wants to play against, because when played to her maximum potential, you simply cannot stop her and the game will feel impossible to win. That's all I have on Hell for now. Thanks for watching.